Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to Vampire 101. Now, in the last episode, I don't know why I went like that, we discussed the different types of vampires one might run into. From Dracula to Revenants, were just reanimated corpses. Think zombies, but they go after blood of family members. And then, what most people think of when they think of vampires. And Twilight. In today's episode, I thought I might want to go over some of the folklore behind vampires and how to deal with them. Either killing them or trapping them, I guess depends on how you want to look at it. Now, supernatural, for the most part, when it comes to folklore and mythologies and whatnot, is pretty spot on. They kind of pick and choose here and there, especially in later seasons, but in earlier seasons, they've been fantastic. Like, if you watch any vampire episodes, in fact, I recommend you go and you watch some. Stay away from the Live Free or Twi Hard, I think was the episode. I mean, I'm all for, parodies and whatnot, but I felt like that one was just done out of spite rather than a sense of parody. But yeah, any episodes in the earlier seasons that had to deal with vampires will actually tell you quite a bit of what you need to know, for the most part, in the real world when it comes to the folklore behind it. Now, in, let's see, what was the name of the country? Well, in most Eastern European countries, like I mentioned in the last video, vampires had to be buried a certain way, otherwise they would come back. Now, another thing I didn't mention in regards to vampires and werewolves, since I was talking about that also yesterday, is if a person in life was a werewolf and they were not baptized, either before becoming a werewolf or afterwards, when that werewolf is killed, its body will come back as a vampire, but it will be of the revenant type, if I remember correctly. So that's something to remember. Now, most people, they think a stake to the heart kills a vampire. This is not the case. The point of the stake was to keep the vampire trapped in his coffin or casket upon being buried, or she, so that they could not get out and feed on the blood, and that's what killed them. They starved to death, or starved to undeath, I suppose. In another country, what you had to do was, if a person was suspected of becoming a vampire after death, was you would place a sickle over their neck. Like, you'd have it standing up, so that when the vampire literally rose from the grave, their head would be cut off. And another one, you had to cut off the head of the person who died and was suspected of becoming a vampire, place it between the knees in the casket, and you had to stuff, I forget, I think this is where the garlic cloves come from. You had to stuff the mouth full of some sort of herb or spice or something. I can't remember which, because there's so many different ones. And that's how you stopped a person from becoming a vampire. Now, none of these things actually had to do with killing the vampire outright, so much as it was keeping it from getting back out. When it comes to killing a vampire, most of the time, even Twilight agrees, fire is your go-to method. I just watched the remake of Fright Night yesterday. It wasn't that bad. I never saw the original, so I'll probably try and watch that sometime soon. But yeah, it wasn't awful, and I like that they mentioned werewolves and whatnot. Let's see. Some other ways of dealing with vampires. Okay, in Fright Night, they mentioned different types of vampires. In fact, David Tennant's character, which is the only reason I watched the movie in the first place, mentions that this particular vampire is a strong breed of vampire, implying that there are other ones that are not as evolved or as powerful. And his type is the one that is much more supernatural in nature. This is the reason for him not being able to enter a home unless being invited, which was the case for most of the fair folk in regards to, say, Irish mythology and really just all over the place. that is to say the world, if they would need an invitation to come in, because otherwise death or punishment of some kind. It was, depending on which folklore you follow and what part of the world you're in, like with gargoyles. If you guys ever watched that show, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, go watch it. They introduced the fair folk, which is the third race. And they include anything like fairies and pixies, and really anything supernatural would be considered one of the fair folk. And the leader, in this case, Oberon, and his wife Titania, they laid out some ground rules for everybody so that they couldn't accidentally reveal the fair folk to the humans in the real, or in the present day, rather. Presumably one of these would have been the whole can't enter a home unless invited. Now, the vampires work a little bit differently in regards to comparing them to the fair folk from gargoyles and most other mythologies. One of the reasons given for why the vampires can't enter a home is because they feast on blood, and it's black magic, and they can't, you know, there are like limits to what they can and cannot do. Kind of like if you guys ever saw Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Spoilers in case you didn't, but if you haven't, just go watch it real quick. It's a really good movie. I mean, it's a little slow here and there, but it really picks up when it needs to, if you ask me. There's a part where the newly turned vampire tries to kill the one who killed his wife and turn him into a vampire, and he can't. Like, he physically is incapable of stabbing him with the silver knife, because only the living can kill the dead. So it stands to reason something along those lines works for vampires. They can't enter the home of the living. Kind of like how you can't really have a ghost haunt you if there isn't already one at your home. This is why a Ouija board is a bad idea, because you're inviting the ghost in, and it might not be a ghost. It could be a demon, although demons are free to roam here and wherever they choose. Let me know if you'd like to see some videos on demonology and whatnot. I'm sure I would love to talk about Ed and Lorraine Warren. As much as I love The Conjuring, there's a lot of negative things I'd have to say about them. Not that I'd be attacking them, I'm just saying negative. But back to vampires. So, we've gone over fires. Probably the easiest way to just kill everything. There's a reason fire is fire, I guess. I believe the reason behind killing witches in most stories. Did you know? A lot of people think in Salem the witches were burned at the stake. They were hanged for the most part, and one guy was crushed to death, and a few others had other things happen to them, but no one was actually burned to the stake. Anyway. Fire is like the physical representation of God's righteousness, His holiness. Not the Pope. Hello, Pope Francis, I love you. For instance, the Seraphim, I like that I'm all over the place in this video. The Seraphim are a class of angel. They're one of the most powerful angels. Second really only to God in terms of strength, I guess. They have 10 wings with which they cover their entire bodies with. And the reason is because anything below a certain class of angel would cease to exist altogether. Their name, if I remember correctly, means the burning ones. And they are the light that is God's love. An interesting thing about angels is the strongest ones serve the weakest ones. Oh, and also celestial is actually the proper term for what you think of as angel. Angel is a job description. It means messenger. Celestial refers to the physical, well, not the physical, but you know, the species, I guess, let's call it that. That's where the stars and the sun being called celestial bodies, that's where that comes from. Anyway, so fire kills everything because it is a representation of God's love and righteousness and destruction, I guess. I don't know. The stake only works if you find them during the day and you can trap them in their coffin so that they can't get out and feed and they starve to death. Cutting off the head. For good measure, you're going to want to cut off the head and burn it anyway, just to make sure. Let's see. I don't know if exsanguination works. That's a word meaning bleed out, essentially. Like, say they just fed and you were to, like, cut their stomach or their heart. Because since they're undead, they don't really need those organs. And I'm not sure if anyone's ever, gone into mythology and tried to figure out a way that the digestive system would translate into a dead body trying to take in the blood, which is part of the reason for the whole the drinking blood is black magic, is because they don't need it to feed, they need it to continue their existence. The best way I can describe it is, if you guys haven't seen Supernatural, I'm sorry that I'm using so many analogies to that series, but you should really go watch it. There is a character who needed to consume gallons of demon blood. In this case, it was the blood of humans possessed by demons, in order for his vessel to sustain itself long enough for him to remain inside it. Vampires work much the same way. This evil spirit that is possessing the physical body needs that blood in order to keep, if you would, a physical tether to the world. And if it doesn't get that blood, it just dies. And so if you could find a vampire and trap it long enough, eventually it would just die and you wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. But, once again, set it on fire. I cannot stress that enough. Kill it with fire, kill it with fire, kill it with fire. Are there any other ways that you can think of that I haven't really talked about, because I only mentioned like 4 things, and even then 2 of them were the same, on how you would kill vampires? I know I mentioned in the last video about burning the ashes and drinking it so that nobody else in the family would die, but that was more of a curse than it was a vampire. Well, I guess it depends on how you look at it. It's all a matter of perspective. Well, I think this video went on long enough and I kind of rambled. For some reason, when I'm talking to you guys, like with a little vlog like this, I don't have as a noticeable quiet lisp. But when I'm reading from the books, like if you guys haven't read or listened to chapter 2 yet, I suggest you go do that. It was up like an hour before this one, so you know, I don't know why you didn't. Anyway, I have a lisp when I'm reading that book, not so much when I'm just talking to you guys. It's very strange. I don't know what it is. So let me know if you guys can think of any ways to kill vampires that I haven't mentioned. Let me know if you can think of vampires from different mythologies that most people might not have heard of, because there's something for every part of the world. Even the Aborigines have their own vampire legends. If you want me to go down through a list of some vampires, like lesser known vampire legends, I know that Stephanie Meyer tried to do that with a whatchamacallit, with Breaking Dawn, and the mythological creature she chose is actually a the Brazilian equivalent of a werewolf. Because, once again, the biggest complaint I think anyone should have of Stephanie Meyer is that she did not do the research. Me, I do the research, but then I forget half of it. Totally different. But yeah, let me know if you guys can think of anything. I'll do my best to have an update for, you know, whatnot, incorporating what you guys think, what you guys want to see, want to hear. I don't know. Iggy, do you have anything to add? He's good. Alright, thanks you guys for watching. Hopefully I'll get this done pretty soon. I can start working out, and I think I need to shower. But until next time, goodbye everybody.